Hi, I'm Malika Bilal filling in for Femi OK, and you're in the stream. Today, Baltic states fear an invasion by Russia, but how real is that threat? We'll ask the people who live there. Our digital producer, Omar Badar, is here, and he's looking out for your live feedback as it's coming in. And what's great is that we're actually getting feedback from both Russia and from the Baltic states,
from people who live there. And we have people who are tweeting in. We have, for example, this tweet from Latvia. Anders says, the feeling is we're truly a frontier now. We need all the NATO support we can get. Russia's actions are really scary. It reminds me of 1939. On the other hand, we have some pushback from Mustafa here who says, I don't believe this scenario. I think no one wants any additional conflict at this difficult time. Now, folks at home, we want to know what you think, so be sure to tweet us using the hashtag AJStream, and you too can be in the stream.
Hi, I'm Tamara Barsic. I'm a Circassian activist, and I'm in the stream.
Could Estonia, Latvia, or Lithuania become the next Crimea? Well, since Russia's annexation of the former Ukrainian territory last year, many fear that a similar scenario could happen in the Baltics. All former Soviet states with ethnic Russian minorities, the three Baltic countries are now member states of NATO. And in the past year, they've been ramping up defenses, wary of their former occupier and powerful neighbor. Amid growing Russian military incursions in the region, the countries have requested the deployment of thousands more NATO troops to be stationed near the Russian border. So how real is the threat of Russia to the Baltics, and how are heightened tensions affecting people's lives there? Well, with us to talk about this is, in Tallinn, Estonia, Kalev Stoicescu, a research fellow at the International Center for Defense and Security. He's also a former Estonian ambassador and Ministry of Defense official. In Riga, Latvia, Miroslav Mitrofanov, co-chair of the Latvian-Russian Union, a political party supported by ethnic Russians in Latvia. And in Vilnius, Lithuania, Vaidas Saldžiūnas, a journalist and editor with Lithuania's El Rytas World News desk. Welcome to all of our guests. Now, Vaidas, I want to start with you. What evidence do you see of a threat to the Baltic states and Lithuania in particular?
Well, I mean, if you look at the atmosphere, it's quite tense at the moment. We've been telling this for quite some time. I mean, if you look at the Russian military buildup over the last couple of years, let's say, it's been quite increasing in numbers, in intensity, and all over the Baltic Sea, we see Russian military flights happening. Now, what we've seen happening in Ukraine, when they grabbed Crimea, when they grabbed parts of eastern Ukraine, they seem to be repeating the same things they've been doing like 70 years ago or so. So, to us, it's a sort of a historical happening again and again and again. We really don't want to happen that again. So we reacted. We asked for help. We asked for basically more reinforcements, and we did something ourselves. We reintroduced the drafts. We increased some readiness of our forces. We are buying more military equipment. And we see from NATO, from United States in particular, that they are seeing the same way we do. Because it's not just the emotions, they are reacting to not only our proposals, not our suggestions, not only to our asking for help, they see themselves that Russian threat is growing in the region. And it's not just about us. Sweden, Norway, Britain even, they see the same as well. So it's pretty obvious in the region that Russia is becoming a threat. And as we joke, we basically live on the eastern border. It's like 39 again. We say that, well, basically there's a Mordor on the east from our borders.
39 as in 1939. So I want to show our viewers here a sense of what Vaidas is saying so they can see how close this perceived threat is. This is Russia, of course. Then you have Estonia right around the Baltic Sea. Latvia's in the middle, and Lithuania. Lithuania is the only one that doesn't actually border mainland Russia, but does border an exclave called Kaliningrad. You can see it right there where my pointer is. But Miroslav, I'm interested in hearing what you think of what Vaidas just said, that this is obvious.
It's an example of hate speech, which is widespread among journalists, politicians in Baltic countries. The political elite of Baltic countries think that the globe is turning around each country, for example, Lithuania, Latvia, or Estonia. But when I visit Moscow and have opportunity to speak with politicians, journalists, scientists of Russian Federation, I see that they do not think about Baltics at all. It is not popular issue for discussion in Russia. And it's when I'm speaking with politicians in Russia, it's amazing, but very often they cannot say what is the capital of each Baltic country. And the main direction of Russian politics is Ukraine, and of course it's Germany and European Union. And when we are speaking and comparing the situation in Crimea and in Baltic countries, and I can say about this difference because a year ago I was an observer in Crimea. It is one very important difference. In Crimea, the majority of local population was in favor for joining Russia. In Baltic states, the majority of local population, including ethnic Latvians, Lithuanians, and Estonians, and including Russian minorities, are against joining Russia. And it is the main protecting issue, or the crucial issue, the crucial difference in the situation which was in Crimea and Ukraine.
Okay, Miroslav, I want to give Vaidos a chance to respond to what you said, because you did mention hate speech, so I want to hear what Vaidos has to say about that.
Well, I really have no hate toward Miroslav or to Russians or to Russia itself.
But
simply what he said is quite nonsense. Oh, please. What you just said, I can contradict you that Russia don't cares about the Baltic states. Yes, I know that line. I heard that myth. Well, just a few days ago, maybe even yesterday, one of the famous Russian politicians, quite important position also, Mr. Zhirinovsky, of course, he is known as a clown in Russia. However, he said that, well, Russia should retake capital of Vilnius and the coastal city of Lithuania, Klaipėda. So, I mean, when the politicians of that magnitude talk things like that, it is a bit scary, you know, because things like that happened, you know, dozens of years ago. And just like today, people back then said, Soviet Union, what? No, they are not against us. They are our friends. They don't think about that at all. However, they just grabbed us in 39, in 40s, and they took our freedom. So when you say that, we simply shouldn't care about Russia because Russia doesn't care about us. Well, Russia didn't care about Crimea a year ago.
Well, speaking of that particular point. So you were talking a little bit ago, I know Miroslav was mentioning that there might be a distinction there between Crimea and the rest of the countries. And we have people weighing in on this particular point here in our online audience. We have Bengal, who tweeted in saying, as long as these countries share similar traits with Ukraine, we should expect similar treatment because Russia fears isolation. But we have some pushback here from Billy Bidon, who says, Crimea equals Russians living in Russia, you idiots. Why should anyone be anxious about that? So, Kalev, I want to bring you into this conversation. Do you see a fundamental difference between other Baltic countries and the way Russia dealt with Ukraine?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that Ukraine is an unfinished business for Russia, and the present situation clearly does not satisfy the interests of President Putin and the Russian elite. So that would be an indicator also for the Baltic states, the way Russia will proceed in Ukraine. On the other hand, I would argue that the decision makers in the Kremlin know very well the names of our capitals, our history and all that. So, and they have not forgotten us at all. The question is when they would get the time and the opportunity to deal with us. Again, let's look not at what President Putin says or the Russian propaganda, but let's look at the facts. And the fact is that Russia has conducted very many large military exercises in our region, snap exercises without any warning, and any media coverage as it used to be before, and with a precise aim to practice actions and operations against the Baltic states, Poland, even to train nuclear attacks on certain countries in the region. And the other fact is that we have seen that Russia is able and willing to use military force to achieve its aims. And I think that in 2008, when Russia aggressed Georgia and grabbed land, 2 portions of Georgian territory, the West didn't take that too seriously. And now we have a much more serious situation at hand in Ukraine. And we cannot simply let Mr. Putin go away with that.
So, Kalev, you mentioned the Russian incursions into Baltic airspace. I want to show the other side what NATO then is doing. There's a tweet here from NATO Press that I pulled up. 4 air forces, 1 alliance, NATO Baltic air policing to keep our skies safe. So clearly you are seeing this show of force from NATO. Would a bigger NATO presence...
That is a peacetime mission.
Would a bigger NATO presence, though, the question, though, is would a bigger NATO presence antagonize Russia, or would it actually lead to keeping the region safe?
Well, that is exactly the debate. But our point of view is, in the Baltic states, the prevailing point of view is that we really need to strengthen the presence of allies on our territories precisely to avoid becoming a next Crimea. Because as it looks now, Russia only reckons with force, not diplomacy at this point in time.
Miroslav?
And we are
we may speak about nowadays Russia to say is it maybe it's cruel, democratic or not democratic state, but Russian politicians, they are thinking basically on the basis of the common sense. And it will be a very lunatic behavior to occupy some Baltic state in order to provide security then and to provide food and medical care for its inhabitants. Russians do not want to have more depressive regions inside Russia and to spend the national budget in order to develop the human resources and infrastructure of such territories as Baltic states. It's an attitude of modern Russian elite toward Baltic states. They see that these states are not very successful in economics, and they need very big support in the case if they will become the part of Russia. And Russia can get, the Russian elite businessmen can get from Baltics all they need in the 2 conditions: when it is peace and when Baltic states are the part of European Union. So Russian businessmen needs for banks and enterprises of Baltic states in order to invest money. And all last decades to last decades.
Can I ask you a question? Because I see you have a map there, just behind your back.
Yes.
When you say that well, Russia doesn't need Baltic states or doesn't want to occupy them. Okay, let's say you're right. You have a map. Now, compare 2 countries. One of them is Bangladesh with 156 million of people. Another one is a similar by population country, is Russia, 144 million of people maybe. You look at the map, you compare countries in sizes. Which of these countries have land grabbed, have occupied territories, and which needs more territories over the past year? I wonder.
I can
so
understand
how should we
your
believe what you're
emotions
saying?
and very hard and difficult past of our countries. All these wars and foreign forces and on the land of Baltic countries and many centuries of slavery of Baltic nations. It's and so your perception of nowadays is grounded by this very hard, difficult history. But I can say that it is evident.
Crimea,
Well,
Yes.
I love the analogies and the slight history lesson. I want to go to our community now because they're hearing this argument between you, and I know that they have thoughts on this, Omar.
Malika, there's a debate that is ongoing online that I think hopefully our guests will be able to clarify something for us. We have Jill here on Facebook who commented saying, deploying NATO troops to the Baltics is clearly a violation of the 1997 NATO-Russia Founding Act, in which NATO had promised not to place any combat forces in the territory of the new member states. On the other hand, Thomas replied saying, Russian troops in Crimea is clearly a violation of the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances. You have all these memorandums and agreements being thrown around, but Kalev, is there a way that you can settle it for us? Is either force explicitly in violation of any kind of agreements by having forces where they do have them?
The problem we have now, that's a very good question, is that we don't have any rules or principles that we used to have in the European security architecture. Putin, by occupying Crimea in the way he did that, and with the intervention in Donbass, has basically nullified all the major security instruments we have had. The Helsinki Final Act and its principles of territorial integrity and so forth, the Budapest Memorandum, the UN Charter, you name it. So,
Can I just,
but I would like to come back to
the Final Act of Helsinki concerned the Soviet Union, the non-existent state, and it was signed 40 years ago. It is clear that Europe, the European Union, and Russia needs a new document to set new conditions for security on the continent.
What about the UN Charter then, and what about the Budapest Memorandum, which was signed by the Russian Federation? And I would come back to you,
in a more simple way?
Kalev, Vaidos, Miroslav, I'm going to pause you there because it was something you were clearing up for our community. I don't know that you've cleared it up, but I like that there has been a renewal conversation on that, and that's something we can continue online. But what I want to focus on now is what this perceived threat in some countries and non-existent threat in Russia, I guess that would be the perspective there, what this is doing to people on the ground. So I pulled up here, this is a website. Now, this isn't affiliated with the Lithuanian government or army, but what it is asking people, will they be drafted to the Lithuanian army? And Vaidos, this is something you mentioned a little bit earlier. If you're a female, of course, you will not be drafted. If you are male, you might be. Are people fearful? What is the sentiment really in Lithuania about this?
Yeah, well, it's been quite a question over the last few weeks because, well, this is not a real website. It's sort of a joke website.
Right.
But anyway, the point is that, yeah, everybody was talking about it, especially the young ones, the 19, 26-year-olds who will be drafted, and they have been drafted, and some of the, prominent people have been drafted as well, just called up to come for the medical check and see if you are fit for the military service. Now, the military service was disbanded in 2008, so this is an example for you just to see how serious things have become. We need people just in case, because we don't have enough people in our armed forces, so we need to fill the battalions. We need them just in case something bad happens. And when you mentioned about the NATO forces, well, substantial forces in the Baltic states, agreements and so on, we have 4, 6, maximum 10 fighter jets in the Baltic states, and we have a company of US troops in each Baltic state. Is that anything substantial to compare with what the Russians have deployed in the Kaliningrad area? I don't think so, because they deployed dozens of thousands of troops there and possibly nuclear weapons, which is actually a violation of the treaty. So to give you an idea what the feeling is.
I'm going to emphasize the possibly, of course, because that's an allegation that we independently can't confirm. But I do want to go to community now because I know they have more to say.
Yeah, there was specifically questions about how the ethnic Russian communities in these countries are reacting to all of this. So we have a comment here from Ravian who says these countries, one way they should not be responding to the perceived Russian threat is by bullying local Russians, banning Russian TV and radio, and generally playing into the hands of the Kremlin. And then we have this video comment from Elizabeth. Take a listen to this.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth and I'm representing Russian-speaking minority in Latvia. I'm concerned about the current tension between Russia and the West And I have fear that our internal problems or deficits of our democracy in terms of linguistic and cultural rights of Russian-speaking population can be instrumentalized in a bigger political game, and that we as a country and as a minority, as a part of the country, that we are losing the control over the situation now.
Miroslav, can you shed some light on whether how the Russian minorities are being treated in these countries and whether they could be exploited for any broader purposes?
Yes, the 40% of population in Latvia belongs to Russian-speaking minority, and the rights of this minority is they are restricted. For example, Russian language, which is native language or the language of family, has the status of a foreign language in our state. We have a big amount of stateless persons in Latvia as well as Estonia. And we have some restrictions, some limits in building professional career in public sphere. There are only few ministers in both, for example, in Estonia and Latvia, who were not ethnic Latvians or Estonians. So public sphere is partly closed for those who are not Estonian or Latvian by origin. So a lot of problems, but we try to solve them inside the political system of our countries.
Of course, you're hearing now from Miroslav Mitrofanov. Earlier, you heard from Vaidos Saljunas and Kalov Stoichescu. You'll hear more from them in the post show. And I'll give you a little tease for what we're going to talk about in the post show. This is a headline on ProgPost.com. Russian annexation of the Baltics would take 2 days. Now, these are the words of a Czech general who will soon take up a NATO leadership role in June, who says that the Baltic states are not prepared. And we'll talk about that, and I know our guests will have something to say on that. But before we go, Omar has a look at some of the other stories that the stream is following.
We start online, where our website is anonymously compiling the names of pro-Palestine activists to discourage potential employers from hiring them. CanaryMission.org claims it wants to expose individuals and groups that are anti-freedom, anti-American, and anti-Semitic in order to protect the public. But the site also lists a wide range of organizations, from Hamas all the way to Jewish Voice for Peace. Our community responded with Derek over here saying they are trying to destroy students' lives to suppress political activism by scaring people into silence. This needs to stop. And Jason argued for returning the favor, saying they should blacklist the very people who created the website. Up next, we go to Saudi Arabia, where a rare exchange took place. A man from Qatif, that's where an ISIL attack on a Shia mosque took place, confronted the crown prince about sectarianism in the kingdom. Check it out.
احنا نقول إذا الحكومة ما تقوم بدورها فهي تسمح لي الأمير سماحة سمو الأمير فهي شريكة في هذا الجرم.
لا شوف اسمع أنا داري إنك منفعل ولا ألومك في شهداء متوفين، لكن الدولة قائمة بدورها وأي أحد بيحاول يقوم بدور الدولة سوف يحاسب.
Now, by the way, this got more than 1 million hits before the original video was taken down. Now, this exchange had many commenting on the monarchy's handling of sectarian violence. You have Ayman over here who said that the spark of sectarianism nearly burnt the whole country down, but the crown prince put an end to it with his firm response. Faiza, on the other hand, said they better start putting more money in the regional coalition against ISIL, while Muhammad appealed to the crown prince to enact a law that criminalizes sectarianism so we can get rid of incitement by both Sunnis and Shias, I beg of you, he said. Now, for more on these stories and others, you can go to our website at stream.aljazeera.com or go to our Facebook page. Malika?
I'm looking forward to all of those stories. Thanks, Omar. Now, on Friday, we're getting scientific. We're hosting an online open editorial meeting for science stories. So we want to hear your ideas. We'll stream live at 1600 GMT at stream.aljazeera.com. So start tweeting your ideas now with hashtag StreamScience. Now, in the meantime, we'll see you online for more conversation on the Baltics. See you there. Welcome back. This is the Stream's online post show. We're talking to people in the Baltic states about tensions between the NATO forces that protect them and Russia. Let's get right back to that conversation with what I teased you with before we entered into the post show. And that was a quote from a Czech general who's soon to take up a top NATO leadership post, who said that Russian annexation of the Baltics would take 2 days, and went on to say that these Baltic countries are embarrassingly ineffective in their steps to combat these threats, really. When you hear something like this, Khalif, what do you say?
Well, I would say that that statement was quite unfortunate. I don't know if that Czech general who will become the chief of the military committee in NATO, a very high-ranking post, has ever visited the Baltic states and took a good look at our defense and the preparations for defense. Perhaps you would have a much better opinion then. I would agree that Russia could organize in 2 days a provocation, a military conflict, but that they would basically conquer and control the Baltic states in 2 days. I think that I wouldn't see even in my wildest dreams. What I would like to add is also that Russia obviously has an obsession with the Baltic and the Black Seas, where it once, as Soviet Union, dominated both these regional theaters. Now, by acquiring by aggression Crimea, the strategic situation there has changed. You also pointed out the Kaliningrad exclave of Russia squeezed between Lithuania and Poland. Well, that's exactly the other military outpost that they have in the Baltic region, as opposed to Crimea now in the Black Sea theater, where tens of thousands of troops are amassed and lots and lots of heavy weaponry. So that is a clear threat to us.
Now, can I just come back to those 2 days? It's a very simple thing, I think, because, well, one thing, Czech Republic is the one that consumes the most beer, so talking about the Czech general. Another thing is, well, if they want to occupy in 2 days, there's a Greek old saying, molon labe, come and claim, our weapons in 2 days. But this sort of accounting is a bit irrelevant, it's childish in a way, because when you talk about what NATO is doing and what Baltic states are doing, one thing needs to be taken into account. Baltic states are members of NATO. They have their armed forces. Little, yes, but effective also. And they are preparing for what may come. Hopefully will never come. However, we are actually preparing. The draft system, the constant exercising, that's what's happening in the region. And if anything bad happens, don't think that it only touches our region, only the Baltic states. Major effects will be felt all around the globe.
Hey, Vaidas,
so hopefully that won't happen.
Just to backtrack a little bit on a point that I was making earlier, I mean, the reason why we brought up this whole issue of ethnic Russians in these countries is because that was the excuse that Russia ended up using to intervene in Crimea. So I just want to play this video comment that I have from Yoel. Take a listen to this.
Given the separatist conflict in eastern Ukraine, how likely is it that ethnic Russians in the Baltic states will rebel against their own governments?
Vaidas, do you want to comment on this, whether you see this as a possibility at all?
In Lithuania, I really don't think that's going to happen. If the Russians would send their little green men, what they did in Crimea in a so-called local rebellion, we'll later. But I don't see any problem with the local Russian population, as such, because there are many local Russians who serve in Lithuanian armed forces, and I would trust my life to them.
So a couple of things here. This is what Vaidas was talking about when he mentioned the little green men. You can see on my screen here, this is a tweet picture. And the little green men are a reference to men in green uniforms without insignia. They're also often cited to be Russian forces that infiltrate foreign nations. But picking up on the point that Omar raised about ethnic Russian minorities in the Baltic states, I wanted to show this tweet. This is a Twitter picture circulating in Latvia. They're sharing images calling for the establishment of what's called the Latgalian People's Republic. Miroslav, is there any really accuracy or legitimacy behind this? And now, of course, we can't identify whether or not this is a call coming from within Latvia or whether it's coming from outside, but is there tension boiling within the ethnic Russian population in Latvia?
We have a lot of problems with ruling political parties, which are mostly right-wing, and we have tension between two communities, but this tension must not be overestimated. The attitudes between two communities, ordinary people, are rather peaceful at the level of everyday life. When we are speaking about this flag banner of so-called Latgalian Republic, it was not successful joke of one person only. Not any organization, not party is standing behind him. So we are visited by many Western journalists in last year. And all of them are asking when you Russians will ask Putin to send army here in Baltic countries. And when they receive the negative reply that we are not ready to launch a war in our country, we are ready to rebuild, to restore this country, to change its laws. These journalists, they do not publish any articles, and there is any reflection in the mass media. Why? Because I see that it is a public relation campaign launched by big producers of armament, maybe in America.
Or maybe you just
countries.
didn't see, because I saw that. They published that there are no Russian problem in
Yes, but
Estonia.
I try to trace all my discussions with Western journalists by checking what is the reflection in newspapers afterwards. Only in 10% in cases they are writing something about our situation, and if they cannot find any negative, they publish this banner of one marginal man, and it's copy and paste from one newspaper to another newspaper. Such a joke.
Well, Miroslav, as you were talking, I could see Khalif wanting to get in. Khalif, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I have basically two comments to make to this point. The first, that's all people in our country, and presume in Latvia, Lithuania as well, would they be Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians, or Russians, do live these days their normal lives as usual. So there is not an atmosphere of war in the air, so to say. Of course, in our countries, we are very well aware of developments in Russia and Ukraine, perhaps much more than in many other countries. These events are properly reflected and in detail in our media, so we may react quickly to a change in the developments over there. As a matter of fact, the enlistment to the Estonian Home Guard has tripled this year after the events started to unfold in Ukraine. So there is a sense of the citizens that they must do more to defend their country if necessary. On the other hand, of course, if we speak of a minority of about 25% of Russian speakers in our country as well, you can always find a few hundreds or maybe a few thousands who might be non-content with the government or whatever, who may be manipulated by Moscow, because many of them actually receive their information only from Russian TV and Russian channels, and that makes the difference of opinion between them and the rest of the population. And last but not least, we have seen that Russia has developed the old KGB triad of provocation, disinformation, and camouflage to perfection right now, as we have seen it in Crimea. So not a single Russian was actually abused or discriminated there. At least no one has been. But it still served as a pretext for the annexation of Crimea. Where are all those?
It's not fair from the point of view of ethnic majority in Estonia.
Crimean people and so on. So just to say that Moscow doesn't really need a real pretext, they can always invent something and make a provocation if indeed. So, but the real situation, of course, is calm right now, and let's hope that it will remain like that.
I like ending with that it's calm right now. Let's hope that it remains that. And I know that Miroslav had something to say, but unfortunately that's all the time we have for now. I see you nodding your head, but you can continue this conversation online, get a Twitter account and follow us. And then of course, continue this conversation. Make sure you use that hashtag AJStream. I will give the last word, of course, to the community. What are they saying?
The disagreement is still alive and well. You have Billy over here who says Russia has always posed a threat to the Baltics. Now is just the season of reckoning. But you have Babs here who says, no, he doesn't see it that way because I see Russia as a nation rising and wants to be respected in the community of nations.
Well, thanks to all of our guests and our community for a fascinating conversation. Kalev Stoichescu, Miroslav Mitrovanov, and Vaidos Saldžiūnas. Thanks for being with the stream. And thanks for watching. See you online.